If you were starving 13,000 years ago, the last thing you should do is waste grain on alcohol. But someone did exactly that, and they may have served it at a funeral. There were no farms, no reliable harvests, and no guarantee that tomorrow's grain would exist. Every handful could have been dinner. Instead, someone crushed it, soaked it, warmed it, waited for it to ferment, and turned survival food into a drink. So why would anyone do something that inefficient? The obvious answer is that people have always liked a party. But the oldest known brewing evidence points towards something stranger. Beer may have become a kind of social technology before agriculture, a difficult drink that helped organize the living around the dead. If that is right, beer was not merely a luxury civilization invented after food became abundant. The desire to make and share it may be older than fields themselves, and that raises an uncomfortable possibility. Maybe humans did not wait for civilization to invent drinking. Maybe drinking helped make large, organized gatherings worth the trouble. That possibility turns the usual story upside down. We imagine civilization producing surplus, surplus producing leisure, and leisure producing alcohol. Raqefet hints at a messier order. People may have wanted the gathering before they had the surplus. The drink was not simply what happened after society became organized, making it may have been one reason to organize at all. The cave is called Raqefet, in what is now Israel. Around 13,000 years ago, Natufian hunter-gatherers returned to this place, buried people there, and worked wild cereals in heavy stone mortars. Do not picture desperate wanderers chewing whatever they found. Some Natufian communities built substantial settlements, harvested the same landscapes repeatedly, stored food, and stood close to the long transition toward farming. They knew grain intimately. They just did not yet have domesticated fields producing it on command. That made every deliberate handful more expensive. And yes, beer is doing some work here. Nobody was pouring a clear, cold pint with a foamy head. The drink was probably thick, cloudy, weak by modern standards, and closer to fermented cereal gruel. But microscopic traces trapped inside the mortars show that grain went through different kinds of processing. Researchers compared the damaged starch with cereals they crushed, heated, wetted, and germinated experimentally. No single starch granule says prehistoric bar. Together, however, the traces look less like porridge left in the rain and more like a sequence of deliberate choices. Those choices were annoying. Fruit can ferment almost by accident because its sugar is already available. Grain hides its energy as starch. Before yeast can make alcohol, people have to unlock those sugars. That means processing, water, fuel, timing, containers, and the possibility that the whole batch becomes disgusting. This was not someone forgetting lunch in a bowl. It was a project. And once brewing becomes a project, the thumbnail question becomes much sharper. Why spend scarce food, several pairs of hands, and days of waiting on a drink that disappears in one evening? Now put that project back inside the cave. Raqefet was a burial place. Some of the dead were laid on beds of flowers and plants. The stone mortars and their brewing traces belonged to that larger setting, which is why researchers connect the drink with ritual feasting. Think about the reversal. We normally imagine beer arriving after abundance. First fields, then surplus, then celebration. Here the order may run backward. Wild grain was still costly, yet people processed it beside the dead. The oldest known brewing evidence may not begin with a victory feast. It may begin with grief. That is not a small change of scenery. A kitchen would make the drink food. A tavern would make it entertainment. A burial cave makes it a message. The bowl now sits between two groups. The people who are still alive and the person who is no longer there. Whatever happened around it had to be important enough to justify sacrificing food when food was still difficult to obtain. Picture the gathering, without pretending we can recover every detail. Someone starts collecting grain long before anyone drinks. Someone remembers the sequence. Someone brings water. Someone finds fuel. Someone waits while nothing visible happens. By the time the bowl is ready, several people have already invested in the event. The drink now contains more than calories or alcohol. It contains proof that people showed up. A person who gathered grain for hours has made a different statement from someone who wandered in when the bowl was full. That may be exactly why the inefficiency mattered. Water is easy. A costly drink is harder to fake. It can mark who contributed, who belongs, and who is willing to give up something valuable for the group. At a burial, that turns private grief into public action. We came, we worked, we remember together. Archaeology cannot tell us whether everyone felt solemn, whether someone hated the taste, or whether one uncle became unbearably loud, but the burial setting fits a shared planned drink much better than one thirsty hunter making a prehistoric six-pack for himself. Was alcohol itself new? Not even close. Fallen fruit had been fermenting for millions of years, and our primate ancestors could process ethanol long before humans brewed anything. The novelty was not alcohol, it was control. At Raqefet, humans took a transformation that happened randomly and forced it onto a calendar. Grain had to be gathered before processing. Processing had to happen before fermentation. The drink had to be ready when the people were ready. A stone blade controls where a cut happens. A container controls where water goes. Brewing controls when biology happens. For a few hours, the liquid changed bodies. For several days, making it organized people. And now we reach the dangerous question. Did beer help create farming? The story is almost too perfect. People valued the drink, wild grain was unreliable, so they began cultivating grain to guarantee the next feast. It is a fantastic explanation, and more than the evidence can prove. Climate, food, storage, population, mobility, ritual, and settlement were all changing together. Beer did not march out of a cave and invent civilization. But the arrow may point both ways. Reliable grain made brewing easier, while gatherings built around valuable drinks could make reliable grain even more desirable. Notice what survives even after the giant claim is removed. Beer does not need to invent farming to influence human choices. If one bowl could attract allies, honor the dead, display generosity, and make a gathering unforgettable, then grain had acquired a second value. It was no longer only tomorrow's food, it was also tomorrow's ceremony, and that could change what people were willing to grow, store, and defend. Later communities kept reaching the same broad idea through different ingredients. At Jiahu in China, 9,000-year-old vessels preserved traces of a fermented mixture of rice, honey, and fruit. In Georgia, 8,000-year-old pottery held evidence of grape wine. These were not copies of one ancient recipe. Different communities used whatever sugars and containers they had. Pottery also survives better than skins, wood, or baskets, so earlier experiments may have vanished. What remains is a recurring human move. Take food, make it harder, wait for it, then share it at a chosen moment. That move becomes more interesting when we stop asking only what alcohol did to the brain. A fermented drink can coordinate time. It can demand contributions. It can separate an ordinary meal from an occasion people remember. Cross-cultural research has found a modest association between traditional fermented drinks and greater political complexity. Alcohol did not build states by itself, but drinks can live inside social systems, inside obligations, ceremonies, alliances, and displays of generosity. They can help turn a crowd into participants. And this is where the burial cave matters again. Humans cannot eat their way out of death. A better meal does not solve grief. But preparing something together can give grief a shape. Gather this, bring that, wait here, share this bowl, remember this person. The drink may have been nutritionally inefficient and socially useful at the same time, but looked like wasted grain may have purchased coordination, memory, and belonging. The things a group needs most when one of its members is gone. Now return to the person holding that almost empty basket. If the only goal was surviving tonight, pouring grain into a brewing vessel looked ridiculous, but humans have never spent resources only on survival. We spend them on funerals, weddings, gifts, uniforms, songs, and meals whose value comes from who shares them. Long before fields guaranteed abundance, people may already have understood that the most expensive food can do work ordinary food cannot. So why did humans brew beer before farming? Because wild grain could become more than dinner. With enough work, waiting, and shared effort, it could become proof that people showed up for one another. At Raqefet, that proof appears beside the dead. When humans cannot fix a loss, we organize around it, we bring something costly, we share it. Civilization may not have begun with efficiency. It may have begun when humans decided some inefficient things were still worth doing together.